Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Dude Nerd Show. It's been a minute. Hope everybody's doing well. Wanted to start this show off by saying thank you to all you guys for all your support, all the questions, comments over time. I've really grown to appreciate it. Thank you very much. So for today's episode, I want to talk about something that a lot of people suffer with, and that is hypertension. Hypertension is the medical term for high blood pressure. Millions and millions of Americans suffer with hypertension. And what millions and millions of Americans don't know is that there's some common medications that you may be taking right now that are not good for you because you have high blood pressure. In other words, some of these medications may actually help to elevate your blood pressure, which is not something you really want to do when you have high blood pressure. So we're going to talk about 5 different medications that can raise your blood pressure, and we're going to talk about kind of a little bit of the why behind it. The first common medication, and I mean this is super common. I mean many people take this medication maybe even once a week, once a day, multiple times a month. Throughout your life, I guarantee most of you have taken this type of medication at some point. And that is a drug class called NSAIDs, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So what are these drugs? So this is like your Advil, your ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve, all of these kinds of things, naproxen, diclofenac. You see like the Voltaren, the gel. Aspercreme, all of those kinds of things, Celebrex, and some of these medications like Advil Cold and Sinus, Advil PM, many different combinations, but the overall class is NSAIDs. Okay, so this class of medications can raise your blood pressure. And like I said, many people don't realize that. A lot of times doctors forget to tell us. I can't tell you how many patients I come across that, have hypertension, and I look and they're taking Motrin, for headaches, or they're taking them for just generalized aches and pains. The doctor tells them, take some Advil, But if you have high blood pressure, it's not necessarily the best thing for you. So make sure that you have a conversation with your provider about that, because ultimately, he or she will be the one to guide you. And basically what they'll do is look to see if the benefits outweigh the risks. I know you guys have heard me talk about that in other shows, so it's no different here, okay? But just be aware, NSAIDs can have an impact on your blood pressure and make it go higher. Okay, so the next type of drug is one called the SNRIs, or in other words, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. These are drugs like they're antidepressants, like Prozac and things like that. Those are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. SNRIs are a little bit newer generation, so they act on serotonin and norepinephrine. So they essentially cause more of both of those neurotransmitters, serotonin and norepinephrine, to be more available. They help with depression, anxiety, as well as other mental health type conditions. But for a lot of people, you don't just have one particular type of health problem or health concern. You may have depression, anxiety, but you also may have high blood pressure. Okay, so with this particular medication, norepinephrine is a drug that I've used a lot in the ER when we've had patients that were losing blood, lots of trauma, and we want to basically cause their arteries to clamp down or vasoconstrict. Norepinephrine does that. It's also, norepinephrine by itself is a drug called Levophed. There's an old saying in the ER, leave a fed, leave them dead, because it causes that massive vasoconstriction. So anytime, if you have a set amount, of volume inside of a vessel, say a garden hose, and you all of a sudden grab it and squeeze it, it's going to raise the pressure, because it's going to have to work a lot harder to get through that same vessel. So that's one of the reasons that that particular drug class might elevate your blood pressure. And again, definitely something that you need to speak with your provider about. A lot of times what will happen, and I know you guys have heard me talk about this, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So if you're seeing a mental health professional, say a psychiatrist, and they're prescribing you an SNRI, or one is like venlafaxine, or another common one is Cymbalta, they may not be talking to your primary care provider that's prescribing the blood pressure medicine for you. So you need to make sure that they're both aware what medications you are taking. In other words, what drug is the mental health person, or what drugs are they prescribing? Also, what drugs are your primary care physician providing? And they need to come together and have a come to Jesus. They're supposed to do that automatically, but as you guys have heard me mention, not always the case. So be your own advocate and make sure that you always have a copy of whatever medications you're taking, with the frequency, the dose, the name of the med, all of those kinds of things. So something to keep in mind. The next one may not come as such a shock to a lot of folks, and that's ADHD medications. A lot of the ADHD medications, like for example Ritalin, Adderall, those are stimulants, and anytime you stimulate, you're going to raise, your heart rate's going to go up, your blood pressure's going to go up. There's other ones, I think it's called Strattera, that is not a stimulant, but it still can raise your blood pressure. So again, a lot of times these particular medications might be prescribed by a mental health professional if you have, say, like an ADHD or some other disease processes that may call for this type of medication. So again, making sure that all of your providers are on the same page with this. Okay, I can't tell you how important it is. Again, especially with this one, these are stimulants. Okay, so just be careful. The next type is our birth control type of medications. Some of the newer ones that use less estrogen are not as much of a concern, which are common with more modern birth control methods, but it's still a possibility. Now, the ones that do have the estrogen can raise the level of a particular protein. That protein is called angiotensin, and if you pause for a second with the term angiotensin and go to, there's two drug classes, ACE inhibitors, ACE, and ARBs, ARBS. Both of those are blood pressure medications. You might be taking some of these. ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. ARB stands for angiotensin receptor blocker. So pathophysiologically and pharmacologically speaking, angiotensin eventually turns into angiotensin 2, which is what can raise blood pressure. So what an ACE inhibitor does is it blocks angiotensin from going to angiotensin 2, and ARBs work in a very similar mechanism. Angiotensin is part of what we call the RAS system, RAAS, and that's renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. So these are mechanisms of action. And I know I went a little deep into it, but I wanted you guys to kind of have an idea of what's going on. So going back, estrogen can formulate a protein that leads to increased blood pressure. That is the takeaway method. Okay, so again, making sure that you are talking with your doctor. If you're seeing an OBGYN who's prescribing your birth control, make sure that he or she is aware that you also have hypertension, okay? A lot of this, and you guys have heard me say this, it boils down to communication and, like I said, being your own advocate, okay? Because, you know, if you're not going to do it, don't expect anybody else to do it. And that's just me being real, you know, being honest with you guys, and that's what I'm here for, okay? So I'll do a couple more. I'll do one honorable mention type. So the next one is our steroids. A lot of people are prescribed steroids, maybe chronically for certain conditions. Maybe if you have COPD, or you might be given a short course of steroids for an infection. You might be given a short course of steroids due to an injury. Lots of different reasons, but steroids, what they do is they cause our bodies to hold on to salt and water, and those two things elevate your blood pressure. The more sodium that you are retaining, you know, where salt goes, water follows. So if you're holding on to sodium and water, that's going to elevate your blood pressure. Plus, corticosteroids, a lot of times the steroids, they have like, they make you feel like you're on top of the world, you know, for the first few days. In my experience, I've been on steroids. For the first few days, man, I feel like Superman. Sex drive is crazy. You're thinking clear. You're you know, like I said, your libido. You have this amazing amount of energy. You feel like you can conquer the world. But after about 2-3 days, then that just kind of goes downhill, and you feel like shit. At least I do. I feel kind of foggy, waterlogged, and my blood pressure goes up. It also steroids can raise your blood sugar. We'll talk about that in another episode. Okay, so just to kind of recap so far, we've talked about NSAIDs, we've talked about SNRIs, we've talked about ADHD medications, we've talked about birth control, especially with estrogen, we've talked about steroids. So that's the 5 that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to throw in an honorable mention because I feel like this is important. Everybody at some point in their life has had a cold, sinus infection, the flu, you know, lately COVID, and a lot of times we might take cold and sinus medication, decongestants, these type of things. Many decongestants, like for example, Sudafed is a common one, and then Sudafed PE, which has phenylephrine. Nowadays the Sudafed is pretty much kept behind the counters because the meth heads, or as I learned from watching Breaking Bad, they call them Smurfs, that go out and buy up all the pseudo they can, and then they use it to cook meth. It has a stimulant effect. Going back again, it causes vasoconstriction, causes your blood vessels to clamp down. Any type of stimulant, just like the ADHD medication, can elevate your blood pressure. Can also elevate your heart rate. When your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure is going to go up. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's one medication that comes to mind. It's called Corsedin, and that one is approved for people with high blood pressure. If you're going to, my suggestion is, if you can't get a hold of your provider, let's say you're trying to go and get some cold medicine on a Saturday, and you know you don't feel like waiting, and calling in and waiting for a call back. You just want to go get some cold medicine. You want some relief, but you have high blood pressure. Go to your local pharmacy and talk to the pharmacist. So many people leave out the pharmacist. You guys have heard me talk about this before when I've talked about keeping your medications at the same pharmacy, and your pharmacist is part of your healthcare team. Many people get the impression that, okay, this pharmacist works at CVS. This is the same person checking me out for my Gatorade and my Snickers. Well, yeah, that's because they work in a retail pharmacy. But don't forget, guys, they went to school for a long damn time. They, many of them 8 years of college. They are the foremost authority on medication. They know more about the medications, the way they work, than the doctors, I promise you. So don't discount them. If you go to the pharmacy, you're looking for some cold meds, go to the pharmacy and say, hey, I'd like to speak to the pharmacist. And as soon as they can, they'll come right over. You may have to wait a few minutes. They'll come right over and they'll say, how can I help you? And you just say, hey, I have high blood pressure. These are some of the medicines that I take. They may not even ask you that, but have that available, and say, I'm looking for some cold and sinus medication, something for my a decongestant. I'm looking for something because I'm coughing, whatever. What can I take? And I promise you, they will steer you in the right direction. They are amazing. They have so much knowledge. Just because they're checking you out for your friggin' Snickers bar doesn't mean that they don't know a ton about medications, okay? So don't forget that. Doesn't cost anything. That's what they're there for. You'll typically see it'll say, consultation, that kind of thing. You just walk up and ask to talk to the pharmacist. And they're amazing. They are a wealth of knowledge. So, speaking of knowledge, hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys got something out of it, something that you can use to better take care of yourself or your loved ones. It's always my pleasure to help you guys. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you know where to leave them. Take care, friends.